Hello everyone, I'm very excited today to talk about a brand new foundation model that was recently released by Google Research. This foundation model is called TabFM, which stands for Tabular Foundation Model. Most foundation models to this date have been developed for unstructured data, such as images, text, audio, and video. And the main reason is that it is relatively easy to collect huge amounts of unlabeled data, and we use them to pre-train large foundation models. However, today we want to talk about foundation models for tabular data. You can think of tabular data as a two-dimensional table or matrix where we have rows and columns. Rows in this case correspond to samples, examples, or observations, and columns correspond to features or attributes. And there are several challenges when working with tabular data. The first challenge is that we usually have to deal with heterogeneous data types, meaning that when we have mixture of continuous and categorical variables. You can see that in this real-world data set, which is called adult income, where the goal is to predict whether an individual's annual income is above $50,000 or not. So this is a simple binary classification problem. But as you can see, working with this data set is difficult because if you look at these columns or features here, some of them like occupation or marital status, they are not numerical. So this means that we cannot just fit this to a decision tree or neural network model, and we have to first do feature pre-processing and also scaling. And therefore, that's one of the main reasons that working with tabular data is difficult, because we have to make a lot of decisions. What do we want to do with this occupation column? Do we want to use it? Do we want to use one-hot encoding? Do we want to use another type of encoding? So therefore, this makes the problem difficult. In addition, once you decide to use a specific machine learning model, let's say you decide to use decision trees, then you have to set hyperparameters, such as the max depth of the tree. Or if you want to use random forest, you need to decide the number of trees that you want to use in your random forest. Or if you decide to use neural networks, then you have to select appropriate values for the learning rate, batch size, etc. All in all, what this means is that if you want to work with tabular data, it is challenging because of the need to do data pre-processing and extensive hyperparameter tuning. There are also other challenges too. For example, in this case, when we have this adult income data set, you can see that we have what is known as class imbalance problem, meaning that 76% or so of the cases, they fall into the below $50,000 category, and only about 24% they belong to the above 50,000 category. So we have to also make decisions about how we want to handle this class imbalance. And this is exactly why this TabFM or Tabular Foundation Model is very helpful. It allows us to feed that table that you just saw directly to this model and be able to get predictions. So I did some research about this model to provide you with some useful information, and you can get started using this foundation model. So first of all, there are about 1.64 billion parameters in this model. And this is something we usually expect because foundation models are trained or pre-trained on huge amounts of unlabeled data. And because of this, therefore, you have to have a lot of parameters. And it is very common to have millions to billions of parameters when working with foundation models. The other important aspect of this TabFM is that, because technically we want to solve supervised learning problems, in this case classification, it seems that they generated, and by they I mean people at Google Research, huge amounts of labeled data. So this is a little bit different than the typical pre-training large language models, because you really need labels. So even though I said earlier unlabeled data, in this case we really need to figure out ways of creating labels for unlabeled data in some sense, and that's something that has not been really revealed at this point how they have done this. But what we know is that, well, there are about 1.64 billion parameters in this model that they have been able to find optimal values for them or train them. And then there are also other important aspects here. So I'm going to show you the brief structure of this TabFM classifier in this case, because there's also a regressor model, but I think once we understand one, the other one becomes much easier. And you can see that there are a couple of tricks. The first one is this part which says cell embedder. And there are two parts here. One that is for numerical values and one that is for categorical values or categorical cells. And you can see that that one has this CAT. Also, interestingly, they're using embedding for the labels too. And all of them are mapped to 256 dimensional vectors. So this allows us to handle all kinds of tabular data sets or tables, regardless of whether they have numerical or categorical features. Then the other part which is very important is this call embedder. And the reason for this is simple. Once you have a tabular data set, if you just switch the order of these columns, the problem should not change at all. And therefore, you need to use attention mechanism within your transformer architecture that can understand these relationships between columns and also rows. And so my understanding is that this call embedder, what really is trying to find is that when we have these 256 dimensional embedding of cells, what they represent and what they refer to. So for example, you saw that some of those columns correspond to occupation, some to the number of education, some of them might be like the number of credit cards. So it is very important to understand the context of each column. Then next, if we look at it, there is a normalization layer, this RMS norm, which is very common within transformer architectures. And then the other part which is very interesting to me is that, well, typically we use a multi-layer perceptron or MLP at the end of the network to be able to make predictions or find logits, and then we use the logits to identify the class which has the maximum probability or the highest probability. And in order to do this, they have hard-coded the number of classes. So if you look at this, what's happening is that through the previous part that we had where we had a transformer, we are going to find a 2048 dimensional representation of these cells and columns. And then we take this from 2048 to 4096, which is 2 times the input features, and then we go from 4096 to 10, and this 10 is the maximum number of classes we can have. So if you have 2 classes, it's totally fine, but you cannot have anything more than 10 classes. So that's one major limitation at this point. You can only solve classification problems with up to 10 classes, and that's because this has been hard encoded into this code. Okay, so I think we covered most important parts of this architecture, and then the blog that was released by Google Research also has a nice visual representation of these. So you can here on the left see the original table, which looks much simpler than the one I just showed you for this adult income data set. And then you can see that here, one goal is, once you do this cell embedding, to find interactions between rows and columns. And we want to alternate between them because we want to make sure that we are taking care of the fact that these things are permutable. And once we find these row compressions, that we're going to predict the labels for test data points or held out set. And that's exactly what we're going to do next. But before then, I want to also talk about the last part of this TabFM. And the fact that instead of using traditional supervised learning, they're using something called in-context learning, or ICL. So in traditional supervised learning, when you have a foundation model or a pre-trained model, and now you have some new data points like xi's and yi's. Xi's are inputs and yi's are the corresponding or related outputs. We're going to define a loss function, and we're going to measure the difference between predictions and the actual outputs and aim to adjust model parameters to best match this given label data. And this whole foundation model and this idea of in-context learning works very well when you have limited number of samples, which is the case for many real-world problems where we don't have a huge amounts of data for downstream tasks, but the goal is that, well, we had some related task in our pre-training and now we want to adjust to get something for the new task. So what is in-context learning in this case, or ICL? So ICL is very interesting because what we do in ICL, we are not going to adjust model parameters and we're going to leave them alone. And this is very helpful because as we just look at this architecture, we have 1.64 billion parameters. So it's really difficult to adjust all of them if we only have like a few tens or hundreds of data points for our task. So instead, we're going to use this concept that we're going to leave these parameters alone and we're going to use something called the context. So this means that this training data that we have now is not necessarily for training in the traditional sense, it's just for the context or demonstration, so that we demonstrate to our model that, well, these are the cases that we have for the new task. Try to find the best possible output for this test data point. So if you want to talk about probabilistic sort of like language here, this means that we want to solve this conditional probability problem, where in the condition we have the context, which are these given data points or label data for this new task. So what this means is that if we apply, let's say, this TabFM to that adult income data set that I just mentioned, I can provide only a small number of training samples, and these are again not training for updating parameters. This is for ICL or in-context learning. And I intentionally, even though this data set has, I think, about 50,000 data points total, I'm considering a very small number of training samples, and also increase that from 50 to 500 to see how the performance changes as we get more training samples. And because this is also a class imbalance problem, I'm looking at accuracy, precision, recall, and F1 score. So this means that we really want to care about true positives, true negatives, false positives, false negatives, and making sure that the model considers both classes here that we have, the overrepresented and underrepresented classes. So overall, this is very impressive in my opinion, because as you can see, without doing any feature processing or feature scaling or hyperparameter tuning, just by feeding this table that we had directly to this TabFM, we can get a classifier that, if you look at just pure accuracy, the proportion of correctly classified points, we get above 80% accuracy. And then if you're looking at, like, let's say F1 score, which is the harmonic mean of precision and recall, we get more than 60% accuracy. And as I mentioned, we have a lot more training samples here to use for this case because it's a huge data set. But my goal was to really do a stress test and see how this TabFM performs when we have very small and limited number of samples. In my opinion, the only downside or major limitation of this TabFM is its computational complexity, because it relies on transformers, and we know that transformers are expensive because we have to consider huge context to be able to compare these demonstrations with all the given pre-training data that we had. And as I said, we don't know exactly the size and the scale of training data. That's, at least for now, is a secret. Then you can see that even though I'm using a really good quality GPU here, a 100 GPU, for example, for cases that we only have 50 training samples, it takes about 300 seconds or 5 minutes to train this model. And then when we go to like 500 samples, that's about like 680 seconds, which is more than 10 minutes. So one can argue that, well, that's fine because we don't have to spend a lot of time on extensive hyperparameter tuning and pre-processing, which I think is a fair point. But overall, I would love to see that we can reduce the complexity of TabFM to make it even more applicable for a lot of data scientists and people who work on applied AI problems. But overall, I hope that you enjoyed this video on TabFM. I'd be more than happy to create a video to go through the code step by step if you're interested. So please don't forget to like and subscribe, and also leave comments down below. Thank you.